The following WJR broadcast is brought to you by MESA for good health, good business, and great schools. To learn more, visit MESSA.org.
He lives actually in fear in his own country, and he's a member of Parliament, of the Dutch Parliament. And yet he's forced to live in a secret government safe house. He has not walked the streets alone in his own country for 7 years, if you can imagine that. He's written a book about all of this now, and he's visiting America to speak about it. His name is Geert Wilders, and we're happy to have him here on the Frank Beckmann Show. Good morning.
Good morning, Frank, and thank you so much for having me on your show.
Now, we do pronounce it Wilders. Is that how you say
it? Yes,
it?
it's Wilders.
Okay,
yes,
I want to make sure we say it correctly.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine living in my own country and having to live in fear like you must.
Well, it's something you don't wish your worst enemy to experience. That's very true, and I explain it in my book, Marked for Death, with a foreword by Mark Stein. I explain why it happened. I mean, I spoke 8 years ago. I started speaking the truth about Islam, and the result indeed was that I was threatened and marked for death. I was banned from many countries, from the United Kingdom to Indonesia to Jordan, from all over the world. I was taken to court, both a criminal court and a civil court. So, and like you said in your introduction, I'm not the only one. People throughout the world, certainly also in Europe, but also in America, people who dare to criticize Islam, are threatened to death, taken to court, and labeled as racist and extremist. So it's nothing that is very nice to look back to. But on the other hand, I believe that nothing is more powerful than the truth. Free people and women everywhere should really never be silent or fall victim to violent intimidation by people who don't like what you are saying. The truth is the most important, and I will always keep telling the truth.
Well, and this is the irony that Mark Stein pointed out in the foreword in your book, that here you are, the man who has been the subject of all these death threats simply for saying things which people chose to take offense to. You're the one living in fear for your life, and yet you're the one being charged with crimes for simply what you think.
Yeah, that's really very hard to explain. I also lived, as an example, I lived with my wife for half a year in a prison cell in the Netherlands, in the same cell that one of the suspects of the Lockerbie bombing, a Libyan guy, as you know, lived when he was jailed there. He was freed by the Scottish government to go back to Libya, where as he committed a crime, and we, just for speaking the truth, followed him in this cell, in this prison. So it's very hard to explain why it's happened, but this is how it works, and this is why we can learn so much from the United States of America. You have at least your First Amendment. We don't have a First Amendment in Europe. Canada, Australia, they don't have a First Amendment. We have crazy hate speech laws that are used for people in 90% of the cases who criticize Islam, to bring them to court and to intimidate them, what we call the legal jihad fair. And I wish we had a First Amendment like America has.
Well, we have to defend it each and every day. I'm
sure
you're aware that it's constantly under attack over here and misunderstood in so many ways. But I know exactly what you're saying, but I'd like to go back a little bit here and get to the genesis of all of this, how it began. What did you say that so offended radical Islamists? What did you do to study the Islamic faith, and what conclusions did you draw?
Well, first I traveled throughout the Middle East. I visited almost every Islamic country. I went 3 times to Iran. I was in Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Egypt, and I studied the Quran. I studied the life of Muhammad. I spoke to many people about it, and I experienced what Dutchmen, I'm just a common Dutchman as well, besides being a politician, what they experience in day-to-day life in the Netherlands, and they saw that their country changed. And I believe that Islam is not so much a religion, it's more an ideology. And it should not be compared to other religions like Christianity or Judaism, but it should be compared to other totalitarian ideologies like communism and fascism. And let me explain you shortly why. what has Islam in common with communism or fascism? Why is it totalitarian? Because people, Muslims, are not allowed to leave Islam. This is nothing that is there with Christianity, but it's exactly the same with communism and was with fascism. If you leave Islam, you are an apostate, and the penalty on that is death. Second, Islam wants to impose its rulings also on what they call the kafir, the non-Muslims. So it's not only for their own group, it's for the whole society, which is a totalitarian aspect. And thirdly, they want to create some kind of Islamic state with global ambitions. So I believe, and this is why I wrote my book Marked for Death also for the American public, to show the true face of Islam. Show the people that our values, and I'm proud to say so, are based on Christianity, on Judaism, on humanism, and our culture, our values are far better and superior than the barbaric Islamic values. And if we acknowledge who we are, then we know what to fight against, that what we are not. So Islam is not an ideology, it's not a religion, but more an ideology, and we should be more proud of what we are. Once again, I have nothing against Muslims. I have nothing against the people. I acknowledge the fact that the majority of the Muslims are not terrorists or extremists, but there is no moderate or radical Islam. There is only one Islam, and that Islam is a very dangerous one.
So those who do not practice the violence that we've seen in parts of the world, including the United States on 9/11, those who practice that are simply taking words from the Quran literally, and those who are moderate do not? Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, indeed. And this is why we have to expose what Islam really stands for. I mean, the Quran is not like the Bible, a book of love. The Quran is a book, if you read it, it's full of violence. It's full of hate towards Jews, towards Christians, towards anything that is non-Muslim. If you look at Muhammad, he was not a kind of Jesus, a kind of loving, good-doing person. Muhammad was a warlord. Muhammad, if you study his life, especially his Medina part of his life, when he went from Mecca to Medina, when he there started the ideology of Islam, he killed Jewish tribes. He married a 6-year-old girl and consummated her. He was anything but a friendly person, and he's still the example for so many people in Islam. So what I try to do in my book, if we really expose what the Quran, what the life of Muhammad, as you know, Muslims believe that the Quran is the word of Allah, so cannot be criticized or seen in any different way. Well, if we expose what really is the truth, we see it for what it is, which means that there is no moderate Islam. There is only one Islam, and that Islam, in fact, as a matter of fact, has no place in our society. There is room for people, whether they call themselves Muslims or not, who abide by our constitution, who abide by our laws, who assimilate to our values. They are equal as anybody else. But there is, and there should be, no room for Islam, because Islam means literally submission. This is what they want, to submit us all. But it means less freedom, and, well, that of course is unacceptable.
From what I have read, you have complained of the Islamization of your own country, the Netherlands, and other countries in Europe, including Britain, and that's part of your book, to tell the United States, don't let that happen here. Why is that a concern, and why should we be concerned about that?
Well, because, like I said, the more Islam a society has, the less freedom will be there. And a lot of Americans really do not know how far the Islamization in Europe already is. Let me give you one example. We have in the United Kingdom and Britain, there are already local Sharia courts that rule according to Sharia law, which courts that devalues the testimony of women, reduce, when you look at their rulings, inheritance rights of women. They get half of men. They allow husbands right of instant divorce, and well, I could continue. So the Sharia banking, separate swimming in schools, separate schooling. Europe is not lost yet, but it's really very far on the way of Islamization. And my message to the American people is, don't let them fool you. What can happen in Europe can happen in America as well. So don't learn from our mistakes. Don't make the mistakes that we made before. Europe is ruled mostly by politically correct cultural relativists, people who believe that everything and anybody and any culture is equal, and that's why we are in so much problems now. So America can take a lesson, because you are almost losing a European ally, but please don't lose yourself.
Geert, we appreciate the time this morning. Thanks so much. Travel safely. I know that you have your security detail even in our country. You travel. You wear a bulletproof vest everywhere you go, don't you?
Well, if I speak in public, not at home
Yeah, thank goodness.
on the radio, but if I speak in public, I have to wear a bulletproof vest. That's true.
That's just absolutely frightening. Best of luck to you. Thanks for telling your story. Marked for Death, the name of the book. Marked for Death by Geert Wilders, and Geert is spelled with a G, by the way. Just